Hi, I'm Dr. Gwen. I'm a neurotypical psychologist who's been supporting the neurodiverse community for over 20 years. In today's episode, I speak with Dr. Debra Winking, author of Capable, educator, and mother of a child with a genetic disorder. Debra shares why she wrote Capable and her hopes for it, how to see our children, especially ones with a disability, through the eyes of capability, and how seeing children through the eyes of capability is an absolute game changer when agency and autonomy are involved. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Debra Winking, author of Capable, educator, and most importantly, a parent of a child with a genetic syndrome. Hi, Debra. How are you?
Hello, good morning, Gwen. Good morning. It's so great to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. I cannot wait for us to really explore your book, and I think most importantly, this real belief and feeling of being capable. It's such a resonating term, and I love that seeing people through the eyes of capability, how that completely shifts the way in which we think about them, hold them, understand them, and support them. So I can't wait for us to get into your book. But before we do that, I'd love for you to educate our audience on who you are.
Sure. Hi. All right. Yeah. Well, listen. Like all of us, I know you've shared yours with your audience before, Gwen. Mine was a circuitous route to where I've come. But when I was about 13 years old, I was asked to teach kids who were really adults with disabilities in our church basement, and it was, that's kind of the old trope. Oh, folks were shut away in church basements. This was literally a church basement, and they were shut away, and they were not kids, they were adults. And I remember, and one thing that I took away from that, even as a 13-year-old, was I learned so much more from them than they ever learned from me. And so that kind of set me off my course into special education. My background really started out teaching students with autism at the New England Center for Autism outside of Boston. And I established there in the early 90s, before it was kind of the thing, was supported employment and community-based programming for, for, for students anywhere from 14 to 22. And I love that work. But I would say I got frustrated when I saw the overemphasis on labeling and reliance on psychological and educational testing getting in the way of what I thought was the potential my students had. And I felt that they were being left behind. So I left there and pursued a Ph.D. in ed psych, testing, evaluation, and kind of, just wanting to be able to advocate from outside of special ed for for those students, because I felt like I was in an echo chamber when I approached it from the special ed lens. And then as a teacher, I sat across the table from so many parents for so many years, and I would offer to them, which what I now think of as platitudes like, well, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, there's a broad range of behavior that might be seen. When these parents, what they wanted to hear, all they wanted to know was how to support their child, a way to be with their child, a way out of fear, and a way in which they could, realize and enjoy life with their child. That was how I behaved as a teacher before I became a parent of a son born with a genetic syndrome. And then I realized, wow, you were like the teacher in Charlie Brown to those parents, wah, 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 just offering things that didn't hit where their heart was. And so I would say that, becoming a parent of a kid with a disability changed my thinking, because I can now see it from both sides of the desk. I had written, I had done some, what would you say? Academic writing, articles for this or that journal. None of it really spoke to me, but Capable was a 7-year labor of love. I really, I'd start, I don't know about you, probably found yourself here. I'd start writing an article and I'd say, yeah, I don't really have anything new to say. I don't know why I'm doing this. I got nothing. But with Capable, I really felt like I had something I wanted to get out to the world, and that actually is, the genesis of Capable. So I'm really happy to be here to share that with your audience, because I have one message, and the message I want to get out there is what we do as parents matters. So it
Yeah,
matters in the life of our child. So
it
that's how I
does.
got where I got.
Yeah, and I love that focus. Parents are the ones that create the context and the environment, the habitat, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
um, for their child to thrive or not thrive in, for that matter. But oftentimes I think the population in the community that we support and that you're involved in, we know that we need to create environments that meet our children and our young people, because they don't necessarily have the ability to do that to meet any environment,
Right,
right?
right.
Or that it takes an incredible amount of effort and energy and resourcing for them to do that. And so I don't know, I feel like being in this community really encourages us to be thoughtful and mindful, move with intention. What environments are my children in, or these young people in? Is that going to be beneficial for them? Can we see that pay off for them ultimately? And I'm involved specifically in this kind of readiness, getting ready for adulthood and adulthood. And in my eyes, it's always, can I see the way this is going to facilitate their autonomy, their agency, their ability to rely on themselves, while obviously still getting support and help? But then I know that any young person that I've ever supported feels very strongly, no matter their profile, about being autonomous.
Absolutely.
It's so important. So I love that. Um, your journey of Capable and writing Capable, right? This culmination of not only your educational, professional experience, but also your lived experience as a
Mm-hmm.
mother, really resulted, I think, in some really practical mindsets, tips, ways of thinking about the way in which we raise children. And I'm really hoping that we can get into those today and share those with the audience so that they have something to, take away.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to get there too, for sure. I mean, I guess what I'd say about the transition. So my first book is Capable. There was a lot of hand wringing when I wrote Capable. I learned through story. I think when we lay things out as a story, we give people a visceral experience, and that's how I learn, is through story. Not everybody does. And so one of the things that was interesting to me was I've had so many readers who said, oh, this changed me. I just had another one that came up yesterday. I will never think the same again about my child. So those are the people that resonate to story. But there were other parents who said, yeah, love the story, but tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Tell me what to do, how to act, how to behave, or how I can facilitate my son's agency and autonomy, or daughters. And so that was the genesis of the second book, which working title now, we're still not out, but is something like Raising Capable Kids, regardless of the challenges they face. And that, um, initially I didn't want to write a handbook. I'm not a handbook kind of gal, but I realized that's what the folks wanted. So I went down this path of doing additional research, which has turned into more than a year of additional research of just interviewing parents. So, and matter of fact, I want to reach out to your viewers and listeners right now and say, if you have a story to tell, a story to share that might help others, I am doing hundreds of hours of interviews, and I'm using those interviews to kind of triangulate these 12 behaviors or 12 habits that I have seen in this research that have all converged on these ways of being that really help a child live their best life regardless of the
Mhm.
challenges they face.
Yes.
What I'm really excited, I got to say, what I'm really excited about is that I'm interviewing parents where their son or daughter experiences what some people might call mild challenges, maybe some processing difficulties, some difficulties in communicating or relating. And I'm interviewing parents whose child does not speak or walk or talk, or who writes and speaks with their eyes because that's their mode for doing that. So what's coming out of this is this set of behaviors um, is the same set whether your child is at one end of the spectrum in terms of their challenges or is at another end. It's a common set. And
Yeah.
what unites these parents, the ones I'm interviewing, is that for whatever reason, some test expert, some psychological measure has deemed their child somehow as not measuring up with the standards of the world. And
Yep.
so, along that spectrum, your child could be anywhere, but the behaviors are the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we forget that we're human. Like, we forget that this community, these children, these young adults, they're still human beings, right? There are still things that
Yeah,
exist no matter the level of challenge or the neurological difference.
absolutely.
That it's important that we do that. And I feel like sometimes what happens inevitably, what I see, is that we throw things out that actually are really good, even just in parenting or in family systems or in
Uh-huh,
education,
uh-huh.
because we have a different kind of learner. And it's like, wait a minute, it's you don't want to throw it all out. We do want to evaluate if it's effective, and sometimes we need to slow things down. We might need to reduce the field or the
Mm-hmm.
inputs. We might need longer. We might need to turn up the volume on something for a little bit, but we don't throw it all out.
Right.
We're still nurturing a human being. And
Yeah,
I don't
you know,
I don't get why we forget
Gwen,
that.
I think I just was reflecting on that this morning, exactly what you said, because I think it's so funny. There are books out there like Grit and Mindset,
Yeah.
great popular books that have popularized the idea that, effort matters and effort creates potential. We tend to believe that, but for our gen ed kids. But for some reason, it's the formality or the finality of that diagnosis that makes us kind of throw out what we know, which is, you know, effort does create potential. And what happens is with our kid with a diagnosis, suddenly we think that everything that is stated on that label or the characteristics of that diagnosis are somehow set in stone. So it leads us, like you said, Gwen, to throwing out good stuff because we
Yeah.
think, oh no, somehow these people are this child is different in kind than my other children, and the same things I might do may not work. And I think that it does a real disservice to our young people who are, in fact, more kids than they are, many more times kids than they are their label. And
Yeah.
that's what we
Yeah.
sometimes forget.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. It's not just about effort. And that's when, some of those same rules don't apply, right? The other
Mm-hmm.
one that I bump up against all the time is this idea, and Grit really covers it. Angela Duckworth really covers this,
Yeah,
which is, change, what precedes change is discomfort, right? We got to have some frustration tolerance, right? What we don't, I think, realize in our community is that there's already a high level of stress involved in just being in the world. And so adding more, they're already dealing with chronic frustration.
right.
So, you don't, I always see that there's an inverse in the work that I do, which is how do you stay within your range of comfort?
Right.
And you only enter the edges or leave the range of comfort, go on the function on the outside with consent from that individual.
Exactly.
They give you consent because then you've had a conversation or some sort of thoughtfulness about what you're presenting. Because I think that even the research that we see now on executive functioning is that context and expectations can be oppressive and suppressive to functioning. We have to be so
Mhm.
careful with that. And so it's not just about, how many times have you heard this as an educator, Deb, right? Like, well, they're going to have to learn how to be in the real world sometime.
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's just not appropriate. It's just not
Right.
appropriate right now.
No, absolutely. And it's
Um,
funny because you're hitting on those habits right now. One of the habits right now that has come through over and over again. It is true, and I will say this, it is true that without we change, and it's a law of humanity, we change with discomfort, but that discomfort has to come with support. If there's
yeah,
gonna be discomfort,
yeah,
it's got to
that's
be
right.
supported, and like you said, with the consent of that individual. But we do know that we ourselves, we as parents, with our child, move out of our comfort zone. If we do not move out of our comfort zone, um, we won't move forward. But that needs to be with, like you've said in the past, with a long runway and a soft landing. But
Yep.
but what I've found over and over, Gwen, is those parents who raise capable kids do, in a very loving and supportive way, move
Yeah.
out of their comfort zone with their child.
Yep. Together with, right?
Exactly, together with, and
Yep.
you said it in the first sentence, very intentionally,
Yeah.
with intention. With intention, I know what I'm doing. We know how far we can do this, and because we know that that's how all human growth happens.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, excellent, excellent. Yeah, let's get into the habits, or let's get into the these mindsets, Deb, if you don't mind. Which
For
one do you want to
sure.
start with?
Well, yeah, I will. So let me just say, we're still deep into kind of the triangulation and research process of getting to what are these common habits. But I'd love to kind of just talk through them, maybe give whet our appetites, maybe do a little back and forth
Yeah.
where we agree, where we respectfully disagree, or whatever. But
Yeah.
number one is that effort creates potential. We have to believe that our kids can grow and change. And I know that sounds ridiculous. Excuse me. I know that sounds silly. You think, oh, we all believe that, but not so. Because like we said, when we have a diagnosis in front of us, oftentimes that diagnosis sort of supersedes what we know in our common sense. Look, this is a growing, flourishing, this is a human being, and they're going to grow and change regardless of what that diagnosis says. So I want to just do I want to offer one example. One family I worked with, whose story is actually in the book, was told that and I worked with her for years, was told that her son Kennedy was not a candidate was never going to be a candidate for movement or speech because the lobe of his brain that governed movement and speech was removed to stop seizures. Well, um, with effort over time, that mother sought indications that her son wanted to move and continually put him in various situations where he could move with comfort. And the story is dramatic. Eventually, um, that little boy is pushing around in a gait walker. And then that mom says, well, wait a minute. If I want, if he is to walk someday, let's don't have him sitting in his wheelchair. Let's have him push his wheelchair. So he kept his talk about support, kept his wheelchair with him all the time, at all times. She called it his little friend. And if you need your little friend is here. But where you want to be is pushing your little friend, not sitting in your little friend. By age 14, Kennedy was boarding the bus to go to school independently. Of course, being strapped in by his aide, there were still things he couldn't do. But the point of the story is effort created potential within that young man. Other centers of his brain took over the movement function. Kennedy is a doll. He's crack up. I love him. He's amazing. He may never have speech. Speech may never happen, but movement did. And that proves the point of our effort creates potential. Our potential is not fixed. So that's kind of number one.
Love it. You know, what I love is this idea of creating regular opportunities.
Yeah.
Something that I say to my parents a lot is, you know, I'd rather you have a good consistent plan. Like a good consistent plan is always greater than like an inconsistent or perfect plan that doesn't last for a few days, for like more than a few days, right? I'd
Or
rather,
like outlandish plan,
yeah,
like something like they're going to fly to the moon. No, I would
yeah,
rather the consistent, everyday, incremental um, work toward, and that's actually the second habit, which is what we've noticed, and what's come out through all this work, is that parents who raise capable kids have a vision. And I don't know the right
mm-hmm,
language yet, so I'm sharing with you early, but have a vision of capable
yeah,
that they set with not not for, but with their
yep,
child, and adjust it as necessary. And I think that's really important, because I followed this. I tell you what, I followed this line down so many parents and my own. I had a vision for Jack. I'm using a pseudonym here because he's out in his 20-something world and doesn't want to be part of what mama does. So in working with Jack, my whole life, I kind of had an idea. I thought someday I see him, having to write a note and sticking it on the refrigerator for a roommate saying, "Get milk." And so that was in my brain. I really believed he could do that. And so when multiple OTs said, "Oh, he'll never write with his hand. He's not going to write with his hand. We're going to give him a piece of technology that does that." It didn't match my vision. And so that's my point of this habit. Have a vision, set with your child, and then make your decisions intentionally based on that vision. So when they offered him not the Dynavox, the communication device that would do all his writing for him,
mm-hmm,
it, the temptation for us as parents is, let's make this easier. This writing with your hand with low tone is painful. We need to make it easier. And in that case, because it didn't match the vision that I had, believing that my son could do it, I said, "Yeah, we can use the communication device, but let's use it as a reinforcer." Because I knew he was a whiz at computers. He could push things on computers, but it was holding the pencil in his hand in a tripod grip that was difficult. So I said, I don't want to close that door for him. And that vision is what allowed me, or what is what caused me to say no to the communication device. Now he's an adult and he can sign his paychecks because I held on to that vision. Now, let me say, we have to constantly be adjusting those visions. I'm not
yeah,
saying that vision won't be adjusted, but what I have learned across hundreds of hours of interviews with parents from every walk of life, they had something in mind that they had determined with, and what they've seen in their child that they had as their notion or vision or imaginings for your child. For example, I want one of the parents I interviewed, I want my child to move through the world with independence. And I know he wants to be independent. And so this parent had a sense that her child was not going to drive. So she gave up on a lot of other things, but she did not give up on teaching him to ride a bike, which took him 5 years, because she wanted him to move independently through his world. And so he did. I imagine that my child will be in 4-H, even though they're very, very overwhelmed. They love people, but they get overstimulated when they see people. Hanging on to a vision that helps you decide. So helps you decide, do I take the segregated class? Do I take the integrated class? Do I take that technology device? Do I not? Is really helpful. And what we found is, I heard a couple parents say, "Oh, I I just followed my kids' lead. I didn't really have any vision or imaginings in mind. When we dug in deeper, it really didn't bear out. Parents have ideas and hopes and visions for their and imaginings for their child, and they shape those with their child. And so, habit 2 is kind of setting a vision with your kid and using that um, as the litmus test for what stuff, services, supports, accommodations you want to take, and which ones you want to maybe use for a while and phase out. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, totally. And I really like the idea of adjustment, because if you're going to adjust, it means you're attuning. It means that you're paying
Mhm.
attention to what's happening and how things are changing or how something may not be working.
Yeah.
And the idea here, like in my mind, would be prioritization.
Mhm.
If you're, visions are not, they're not, we don't usually have 20 of them,
Right.
right?
We have one.
We have some big
Right.
categorical visions. And if that
Mhm.
means, more mobility, use of money, use of a communication device, being able to tolerate more social environments or more overwhelming
Mhm.
environment, whatever that is, inevitably you do have to have a vision of actually where you want or how you imagine your kiddo to look like as an adult. And this is something that I think is very challenging, I think, for parents, because sometimes, they're scared to dream.
Yeah. Right.
It's there's an emotional piece
Mhm.
to dreaming, right? And
Mhm.
so, but I love that. I love the idea of like, get clear on your vision. What is it? Like, where are you
And
going? What's your destination?
because otherwise you might be saying yes to various ideas, ways of being, service. You might be keeping your child in. You might not be introducing certain things that you would like to introduce because you didn't have an idea of where you wanted them to be. But I'm thinking of
Yeah.
your Bright Life system, the the, the system that you've developed. In a way, it's a real concrete tool for doing exactly that, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not an
Yeah.
expert yet. We just had one session with it, but
Yeah, it is. I mean, I created it in order to remove the ambiguity of vision setting, of dream
mm-hmm,
making.
mm-hmm,
Because I think there's just too much, like, there's a lot of reasons why we don't make decisions or why we don't commit to goals or dreams. And I think sometimes it's just a formal process. It's support. I think what I love that you said earlier, Deb, is discomfort has to come with support. Like,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's for a parent as well. Being a
yeah.
parent is highly
Well,
distressing. I'm
exactly.
I'm a parent of a teenager, and I have a
Mhm.
neurotypical teenager. So, I can't necessarily relate to specifically to having a neurodivergent or disabled child. However, I will say as a parent, I am distressed often by having a child because it bumps up against what my own thoughts and dreams and visions are for her. And it might be different than hers. And I'm learning, she's not an object that I control. She is
And
her
that
own
takes a
human being
long
that I
time, my
shape.
friend. I've got 4 of them in their 20s, and it takes a long time. But
Yeah.
what you're saying is so important because we bring something to the table as a parent, and it's so hard to just untangle
Yeah.
our stuff from our kids' stuff, and
Yeah.
that's whether or not your kid has a label of typical or neurotypical. But
Yeah.
I do think that all of our kids, and this is something that came up, and I think it was is really important. Some folks who read Capable, and I encourage your readers to read it because it's changed so many lives. But some readers who read Capable said, well, don't all children have a special need? Aren't all children in this space? And
Mm.
I think while the habits can enhance parenting in general, there's a special place. There's a special place of fear, difficulty, uncertainty. There's a special circle reserved for parents of children who've been told by the system, frankly, you don't measure up somehow, some way you how you move or talk or look ain't cutting the mustard for whatever the
Yep.
world says is okay. And so
Yep.
I want to say that there are times in every child's life where they will present with a special need. Maybe it's a divorce. Maybe it's mean girls at school. Maybe it's some episodic real anxiety or depression. But I did not, and that was why I was careful with the book, I did not want to create a false equivalency between parents of kids who, they're feeling bad because their kid, is encountered, you know, didn't make some accomplishment, didn't get asked to the prom, didn't whatever, and parents who are dealing with a child who, working with their child, and their child is writing with their eyes because that's their best way to write, or
Yeah.
needs support in the bathroom. So I want to say that the habits are universal, but I don't want to create a false equivalency between, all of us who are parenting kids, and it's hard, it's a mess regardless. But I do want to acknowledge and honor that it's different when somehow somebody's put a label on your kid's forehead and said, that's not our prototype child, which bothers me, which bothers me that those labels do that. And I think that there's more complexity in parenting kids who have that. And that because you deal with that every day with
Yeah.
your students and your clients.
Yeah. I mean, it's the difference between a chronic and a situational condition.
Exactly.
And the amount of resourcing that you can rebound with or from, make a big difference. And that, there is a piece here of, and, I think we're understanding this more and more as the neurodiversity kind of movement is growing. And that is that when you are part of the neurominority and you live in the neuromajority, it is a difficult place to be. And I think up to this point, we've really identified, and what's come to light, I think, is gender identity or sexual identity.
Yes.
And we tend to miss this idea of disability identity as
Yes.
part of discrimination, as part of inclusion and diversity. I rarely read, cognitive, mental, physical disability as part of an inclusion statement. I mean, I'm always reading about gender and race and ethnicity and sexual identity. I rarely read about disability when, people with that label make up the biggest minority on the planet. Like, so it's an interesting thing, I think, and you're right, it is absolutely different. And this is why there is a difference between the word equal and equitable. Equal is everyone gets the same amount, and equitable is right. They get the support that they need to bring them up to the same place. And that is a very different kind of idea. And I would agree. There is an additional workload burden, if you will. I don't mean to use burden as a negative connotation, just saying that there's extra to carry here.
But I want to, amen, sister, because what bothers me is that you're right, because, and I think it's because, our brothers and sisters in the world with disabilities have not had the voice. They've not ever gotten the voice to say it. Whereas others in very important critical minorities have found a voice. And I feel like the disability community we haven't done a good job lifting up our voices, those voices. But I will tell you, I work out of the book. I've begun establishing some capable parenting communities where parents are getting together virtually and in person to use and try out these habits with support so that they can help their children live their best lives. But one of the things that relates to what you just said, these parents said, one of the things we want to talk about is that it sucks. It's hard. We didn't ask for that. And so many people say, people come up to me and say, oh, this must be your vocation. You are such a special person because you're raising a child, on the spectrum or whatever. And these parents stood up to me and I was so proud of them. They said, you know what? I want to be able to sit down and talk to people and say, this is not what I signed up for. This is hard.
Yeah.
and I love my child more than life itself. And this is hard. And so I
Right.
think the more we can support parents in that, the better, because, everybody that has a child with a special need is not some kind of monk on a mission. We didn't expect what we've got. We love our child, but we have people from the neurotypical community looking at us like, well, we should smile and take our lumps because this is our vocation. So
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of where people speak out about inspiration porn is what they're calling it.
yeah, oh, I love
Yeah.
that. I love that term. Yes, yes,
Yeah. And it's that same thing,
that's really good.
It's so good. And Deborah, I think it's doing a little bit at a time, whether it's, you're creating these parenting support groups and communities, which is so fantastic because there's such a need to feel a sense of belonging and understanding with a group of people. You
Mhm.
coming on to the podcast, to the show, to talk about this, and hopefully someone's made it to this point and yeah, in the listening of it. But our hope here is to change mindsets. I mean, this is where it starts. Increase awareness is one thing, but actually facilitating acceptance and action and change. And this is why we're,
Mhm.
we're talking about
Mhm.
habits and behaviors is a whole nother situation, right? Like insight doesn't necessarily equal behavior change. I know my psychological colleagues are going to be, that might blow their minds
Up
because it
in an
can't just,
uproar, right?
right, it just can't be about insight.
Mhm.
It has to be about change, and change comes with support.
I think it happens, and push back on me if you think not, Gwen, but I think it happens one parent, one
Yep,
family at a time, and
yep,
that's how it happens. To
yep.
tell you, a little bit is in the book, and this is not a, I talk, I mean, I am a regular Brene Brown uh, study in vulnerability in this book. I talk a lot about the mistakes I made, but one person that spoke to me that I wrote about in the book said, you know what? I always thought that something was going on with Jack, but you acted like, he's got this and to treat him with dignity and just like everybody else. And so I thought, okay, I take her lead. And I think that's what happens. How parents treat their child, so goes the world, right? And so I think hmm, that awareness and change happens by one family at a time, by families who go out and live life with their kids to the fullest. And people say,
Yeah.
"Hey, they're having a great time," not what's wrong with that kid, right? So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Parents are by far the most influential
absolutely.
context
Mm-hmm.
for any neurodiverse and or disabled individual. That family context, it lasts way longer than high school, way
Mm-hmm.
longer than college. And we just know that, right? Because that support system needs to be so tight. And that is just it. That is how it is. And I love that, the parents have a great amount of responsibility in
Well,
the
you were
raising of
talking
their
about
children.
one of the things that we said we talk about another time is the adult services cliff. You know,
Yeah.
environments change for kids over time, but their family of origin and the habits held by their parents as the most influential people in that person's life make can make a monumental difference over the course of a childhood
Yep.
in terms of how that young person comes out on the other side, seeing themselves capable or more disabled, or seeing themselves as persistent or perseverant as opposed to anxious. Those kinds of things. So, anyway,
Yeah.
I just feel like I don't. The, what capable does and what raising capable kids does is not put pressure on parents to say, "Oh my gosh, don't make a mistake," but it's, "Wow, these are the things you can do, the ways you can behave, the ways you can think that'll help your child live their best life."
Yeah, I think that's great. Hey, Deb, I'm wondering if we can pick up one more habit here, or
Sure,
if
I
you could
know.
choose
We're never going to
one
get to 12,
more.
but
I
I can
know
do you one.
we'll just have to do parts of this is what we'll
Right.
have to
Well,
do, which I'm happy to do.
if you're willing to have me on again, I would love to,
Yeah.
because they kind of build. Um, the third habit is put your child's diagnosis in its place. He or she is a kid first. And I know
Mm.
that seems obvious, but it's not. People, once they get that, it's like kids are not. I did a podcast called "Kids Are Not Canned Goods." The label doesn't say everything that's there, right? So not by a long shot, not even a start. And so one of the things that I think is really important is to take the diagnosis. I have a friend who works in real estate in your state, California, and she always says, real estate, it's all about location, location, location. And I say, in the diagnosis game, it's all about information, information, information. Use like crazy the information that diagnosis gives you to get the supports and services you need to help your kid live their best life. But don't be don't be limited by that diagnosis. And I see that so often. So I went back and taught in the classroom 6th through 12th grade special ed in the public school during the pandemic. And I saw today, in 2021, parents still giving so much weight to the indications or characteristics of their diagnosis rather than what they see in their own child. And those things can become self-fulfilling prophecies. For example, the minute they get a message from school, oh, your child was not attending today. Well, of course she wasn't. She has ADHD. We can't expect her to attend. Here's another example. Oh, your child or my kid can't organize himself to get his paper done. He can't organize to get his essay done. And they say, oh, well, of course, the diagnosis says that he has a learning disability. Of course, he's not going to be able to do that. And so then they let it lie. I found that myself as a parent. My kid, 6th grade, was having trouble organizing and doing his paper. And I said, oh, must be the Soto syndrome. That's why. That's part of the syndrome. And left it there. I ended up talking to a friend whose kid was in that neurotypical world. She said, oh my gosh, Jay is having such a hard time organizing for his essay. He cannot put his essay together. We forget that some of the things our kids are doing are just things that they do at that developmental age. It's not attached to their diagnosis. And so when we give the diagnosis so much weight, we start getting what we expect. So I can leave that right there, but I think it's really important to not overly buy into each indication of your child's diagnosis.
Yeah, I love that. Labels are tools,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. They're a
Mm-hmm.
tool to
Exactly.
access supports and services. If you want to describe your kiddo, that's when we would encourage descriptor words or adjectives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that's interesting. I mean, I challenge the adults that I work with when they say, well, it's my autism.
Yeah, right.
And I'm
Oh,
right, like,
yes,
what's my autism? And I'm like, okay, but what's your brand of autism?
right.
Like,
Tell
talk
me
to me
what
about
you're
your
doing.
brand.
Yeah, tell me
Like,
what
just
you're
tell me.
doing.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. And then that inevitably is a wonderful exercise to help them advocate with their systems and supports, especially when they're adults, whether it's at a collegiate setting or a residential setting or with their friends or their family members, like extended family members. It's like describe why that's hard so that your supports are that specific, right? And so I love this encouragement that they're a kid first, they're a human being first, and that sometimes there are things that are normal, waking up and completing homework as being, a syndrome of teenagerhood,
Yeah, exactly.
right? That's a part of it. And sometimes it's just that the volume gets turned up because we might have attentional challenges or executive
Mhm.
functioning
Mhm.
challenges or regulation challenges or whatever, you know.
Let's
I
just don't
love that.
sell that let's just don't sell that kid's potential down the river
Yeah.
because of a diagnosis. Would Do you have time to bear with me just for one more little
Yeah. Yeah. Go
story?
ahead, Deb. Yeah.
My son, I think this really underscores this. My son has a syndrome called Soto syndrome. I felt that that name was worth zero.
Mm-hmm.
I could be in a million. I've been asked to be in multiple genetic studies. He's been asked to be in, they've been asked for my kid in all these things. I'm like, but what does that do about my own child's functioning? So we made this choice. This choice is not maybe right for everyone, and you may get some listeners um, uh, calling in to say something, but we decided not to tell him the name of his diagnosis. So like you said, so many adults, oh, it's my autism, my autism's acting up, my, whatever. It's almost become a trope. And even though the condition's very real, but let's don't let that be the safety valve or the way out of everything is putting it on that. So we said, throughout his life, he was put in a multiply handicapped preschool class because he had no movement, such low tone, could not do most anything. And then throughout school. And so we called it, when he asked, why is this so hard for me? Why can't I do this? Why can't I form words? Why can't I do all these things? We said, you have a muscle weakness problem. You have a muscle weakness condition. For me, your muscles are weak. That connoted a condition or a way, a situation he's in that can be improved. Wait, and he could even think, wait, muscles, mouth muscles, leg muscles, hand muscles. Muscles are something that if you exercise, they get stronger. So until he was 17, he knew he had a muscle weakness condition. We did not introduce the term sodas to him until we thought he could handle that, because I didn't want, when kids walked away from him and not talk to him in class because he couldn't get his words out in time and they've already moved on to the next thought. I didn't want him to say, oh, it's because of my sodos. It's because of my sodos. It's because of my sodos.
Yeah.
Because I felt that was limiting. But understanding behavior, what you're doing, your muscles are kind of weak right now. And that's something we're working on. That, for my son, was a way of putting the diagnosis in its place and treating him as a kid with potential first.
Yeah, and kind of, going back to intentionality. There's a reason why you made those decisions, and it
Right.
was through
Mm-hmm.
thoughtfulness and intention. And that,
Mm-hmm.
what that requires, I think, of each family is to carefully think about their family characteristics, their family values, their cultural value systems, because it's so complex. One, you not sharing the diagnosis might not be right for someone else. And that's because your lived experience is so different than someone else. And so really I think we're encouraging people to think about your own context,
Context.
and right, what is right
Mm-hmm.
for you and why is that going to work for you. There's so many reasons. And I think that's also another issue that we're facing with today, right? Just even in our very divisive kind of political system, even today, it's
Absolutely.
like we're not trying to understand where people are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we sit down and we're able to get that information, we might not agree, but we can understand.
And we
And
can make good decisions. We can make good
yes,
decisions then. I mean, another
yeah,
motivator for us is that we knew that our son was a nut about researching on the internet and becoming kind of at that time he would get kind of in a loop and
yeah,
become kind of obsessed about it. Like,
yeah,
we don't need to put this on him. So it's also your individual child's, every
yep.
child is unique. It made so much sense for my guy, might not make sense for yours, but we can both make those decisions with intentionality.
Yeah, I love it. Yep. Be mindful and thoughtful. What's right for someone may not be right for another, and that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Right.
Right. So I
Absolutely.
love that. Hey Deb, if people want to find Capable or get in touch with you or learn more about you, what are the best ways to do that? And I can also put the information in the description box below.
Great. Yes,
If you're listening to
absolutely.
this on podcast, I can also put that in the description. But tell people like the best ways to get a hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Capable is on. You can get it at it's carried in a number of public libraries if you don't have money to go out and buy a book, but it's also on Amazon. You can get it from Amazon in a day. And it's in some independent bookstores. As for me and my work, capableTheBook.com, highexpectationsparenting.com. Those are my websites. You can find me on Facebook at Capable the Book and on Instagram at Capable the Book. I also have a YouTube channel called Capable Conversations with Dr. Deb, where I've taken little snippets, just little snippets of 3 to 5 minute discussions of some of the key habits and flesh those out in little videos. So those are some
Awesome.
ideas. Though I have to tell you, I haven't put out a video lately because I've been working so voraciously on the second book. But I promise there'll be some new pieces on YouTube on Capable Conversations with Dr. Deb soon. So
Awesome. And I will connect all of that. I will put it all in the description box below if people want to find you. And I'll add your channel so that they can find that as well. Deb, thank you so much for sharing
absolutely.
all of your wonderful expertise and lived experience and your vulnerability. I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's been fantastic, Dr. Gwen. I continue to feel like, the kinds of things we're talking about, the kinds of things we care about are so in line. I want to keep having these conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, ditto, ditto.